Hello and welcome. It is your weekly program that has always been concerned with the virtual gathering, that is, the gathering that occurs on air and online. I'm Sherwood McCaskey, as always. Thanks for your time. It is a rainy day here in Chalky Mount. Of course, it is one of the many features that this community is known for. When we visited St. Andrew in August of 2020, our two gentlemen regale us with memories of life in this community, Chalky Mount. The information they provided could not be accommodated in one program, so here we are again with the Reverend Joelumberbatch and Pottery Industry. They continue the discussion by talking to us about the activities in the plantation yard that inspired their creativity as boys.
There were times when, as youngsters, we took risks, and you know what in Barbados we call mountains, other people call hills. So as youngsters, we used to go on adventures through the hills in Chalky Mount. We would walk right down through Chalky Mount, right down to Belle Plaine, right down to lakes, right down to the East Coast Road. You know, when you're young, nothing seems dangerous. We took some risks back then, but we lived to tell. So we had wonderful times as we traversed the mountains and the ravines and the hills that were found in Chalky Mount.
Growing up as a kid, we used to do a lot of like playing around, you know, like making like scooters, making cane trucks. When crop time come around, all these smash cane, we just take them up and load them up on the trucks, and you know what I mean.
And of course, added to that, you went through the village and you saw what? You saw the cane peel just all over the place, and particularly in the crop, that is. Then your role as a boy, because what happened, you know, we didn't have the video games and things like that, but what the guys did, you made your miniature trucks, right? Those miniature trucks, and you went, you pick up those cane peelings, and there was a particular point in the district where you had your special hoist organized, like a factory, and the fellas would come and line up behind one another, mimicking what happened at the factory, right? And you specially, you know, lift up your canes. You know, those were good days. And of course, then you had also the push carts. You're familiar with the push carts, right? Those were works of art. Do you know, I'll tell you this, that Chalky Mount is one district that had an ambulance for years. We had an ambulance service. And our ambulance service was the box cart. And very often, you know who were the recipients of that service? The fellas. Went up by Waldron and drink too much. Somebody would say, this guy get was they call the ambulance. And in tutus, a fella there with a box cart. He go and drop them off at the home. You know?
There is a number of water courses around this community. Some refer to them as rivers. The youngsters must have had an association with these water courses. Yes, they came upon them regularly during their many explorations of the area, when they would often enjoy the offerings of the trees.
Go on the river, fish, Coggins River, that come down from like Mount Hillaby and flow right down to the East Coast, and go out to sea and catch fish, you know. So we used to do a lot of fun things like that there.
Fruits were in abundance back in those days. Cashews, fat porks, guavas, mangoes, akis, dunks, you name it. Sour sops, sugar apples, you could find in Chalky Mount. In the gullies, in the hills, in the ravines, wherever you go in Chalky Mount, you could find fruit.
In those days, you didn't really have to go and ask anybody. I mean, there was so much abundance. Nobody killed you if you pick up one or two. And then, of course, the canes. Those were days where you sat down and there was no peeling. There's no peeling with a knife. Use your teeth. Huh? You suck two canes on a stretch. And then you know the result. Some fellas then would wet the bed at night. You suck too much cane. But those were good days.
Right now, down there dry up right now. And I can see the difference and the contrast of the climate change when it was a kid, how it was and how it is now. One of them rivers would have never dry up. We had a river now that crossed, we used to call it Brewster Gully. And we used to go down there and fish, great fish and thing in Brewster Gully. Now, You can't go and fish in the creek, fishing the boat down there because the rivers dry up, you know what I mean? And again, you don't get as much rain as before now.
Climate change and how that is affecting us here in Barbados. Now on to an experience of two little siblings who went contrary to mother's wishes, who sent them on a shopping expedition.
I remember an occasion, and I say to young people, that's why you got to be obedient. My mother sent my brother and I to Belle Plaine. Now, even though Mr. Waldron sold oil, when he ran out of oil, we had to go down Belle Plaine. So we were walking down Coggins Hill. My mother gave us $20. Now, you know, back in the 80s, $20 was like $100 now. And she told us, go get the oil and come back. Now, that trip should have taken us 20 minutes down and about 20 minutes up. We should have got back home in an hour. But we had Ackies on our mind. We stopped at a man called Mr. Strickland in Coggins Hill to buy Ackies. We didn't have oil on our mind. My brother Sean and I had Ackies on our mind. So we went to the tree, we picked the Ackies, and we got down, and we were ready to go. And I said to Sean, do you have the $20? He said, no, I thought you had it. I said, but you know you have it. We had it there, man. We couldn't find the money. And I tell you no lie, we stood in the road for about 2 hours looking for this money. Mr. Strickland came out to help us. People passed through came out to help us. We looked all over that road for about 2 or 3 hours, could not find the money. Now, our mother said, you know, these guys taking long to get back home. And when we looked up the hill, who we saw coming but our mother. You know, in those days, parents used to beat first and ask questions afterwards, so we were scared. And to lose $20 was like lose a lot of money. And would you believe it? Although many people helped us look for that money in the road, my mother came and found the money right in front of us in the road. I told people that God had that money for us for a reason, to teach us to be obedient. And when your mother sends you out, go where you're sent.
And it continues to rain here in Chalky Mount. Now, this is a very beautiful community. As expected, it affords spectacular views of neighboring communities.
Back in the old days, you had a panoramic view of Belle Plaine, you had a panoramic view of Lower Parks, Lakes, Troyer Path, Baxter's, practically the entire sections of St. Andrew.
At the back of Chalky Mount, it's called Paradise. I don't know if you can get a shot of that. Paradise. When you look at that, in fact, it is only in recent years that you have at least about 1 or 2 houses in Paradise. But Paradise was what it was, Paradise. One of the most beautiful spots that you can ever see. Lush green, those beautiful hills in the background. But it's in that general area that you went, you got your cashews, and you got your fat porks. And if you wanted to see a real good view of all of St. Philip Coast up, you can go over there on that. I believe it was said to be the 3rd highest point in Barbados. Those hills overlooking the East Coast Road at the back of Chalky Mount. Just fantastic. And of course, it is there too that you went to get your sand from the sand hole. And I'm not talking about sand for building, but there was a special sand that the residents of Chalky Mount went out there to get to assist with the scrubbing of the floor. As a little boy, you had to make your trek out there, that sand hole, and get this white sand. And your parents would use it on the floor with the scrubbing brush, and when done that, those floors would be lily white. That is interesting. But then you had the sour dirt. I remember in some of the parish, somebody else talked about the sour dirt. But there was a particular hill in Chalky Mount where you actually went and got that dirt and you ate it. A nice taste to it. Just right by the Boyces. This is Sinclair Boyce, late Sinclair Boyce, who was the postman in the village. And those things were very good memories. And then there were endless mangoes. Mangoes all over the place. Mangoes and cashews all over the place, and also guavas, you know.
What about village entertainment? With poor transportation, individuals did not have easy access to the major entertainment spots in the city.
Just come to Chalky Mount and you would have experienced some of the most nostalgic, some of the most memorable times ever in your life. It's a place that many wonderful things happen. And I remember in those days when transportation was not so much available to us and television was a rarity. There was one house in Chalky Mount that had television back in the 70s. That was the Rudder household. And many times on night to watch television, many of us would crowd around the house, would look through the window. Some of us would have been fortunate to get a seat in the house just to watch Days of Our Lives. Star Seeking Hutch and those pictures that showed back then. Another form of entertainment that was synonymous with Chalky and perhaps with other villages was the mobile cinema. And right here in this area here where we are standing now, on nights we would gather to watch the mobile cinema. That was indeed a form of entertainment that we enjoyed as youngsters and that we look forward to.
There is a number of individuals in the community who are celebrated and revered, whose word was final, and who regarded every boy and girl in the community as their very own. In Chalky Mount, they were given a special designation.
There were many people in the village who were considered mothers in the village. My mother was one of those people, and there were others like Sister Marshall, as we call her in Chalky Mount, and others who were considered mothers, and the Wilkies and the Bryans from across Top Rock, those were considered some of the mothers in the Chalky Mount area, and people would just come at each other and they would eat and everybody had fun. Sundays they would sleep there, they would play there the whole night, and all the children in the village would gather there, and you could not go by a house and play and go home hungry. The mother would connect all of us and they would feed us, and by the time you got home you were full. I remember one time though, we loved fruits so much that my brothers and I would go home from church or in the week and we would eat mangoes until we were full. So by the time our mother called us for food, we didn't want any food. You know, the mothers got angry. But you know, we enjoyed eating fruits. You know, our snacks were not chips and corn kernels and so much. We ate foods like mangoes and guavas and cashews. I believe that's why we scarcely got sick. Because, you know, we ate the natural, untainted fruits and they did our bodies well. So I'm saying therefore, living in the country is a wonderful experience. You know, there's less noise, less pollution, the air is fresh, God-given air. And along with that, you have beautiful sceneries to enjoy. So it's a wonderful experience.
Having traversed the island during the last 11 months, I can attest to that. What about stick licking? Characters somewhat, and men who assumed positions in the community.
One of the individuals that stood up to me in Chalky when I was a young boy was a man called Joe Green. Now Joe Green was funny, Joe Green was skilled. In fact, in those days, I'm told that Joe Green was one of the best stick lickers, if not in Chalky in Barbados.
You had Mr. Foster, Mr. Wilkie. You never saw those guys without a stick, you know? And from time to time, you know, they'll give you a little demonstration of stick licking, right?
So I remember seeing a few of his moves in the early days, and all those guys were great. But he's one of the guys who stood up with stick licking, and there were not many who could rival Joe Green back in those days. Not only was Joe Green a great stick licker, but he was a resident barber. Now I remember the same Louis Walton shop was the barber hive. And my mother would send us and other youngsters from their parents would send them. We didn't always want to go because back then you got what we call a bald head. Now a bald head may be style now, but back then a bald head was something to be laughed at. And when you got your head cut bald, you would get a slap or two, get a baptism with a slap or two over your head. But Joe Green was good, and you know, most of us didn't have to pay for these haircuts because, as I told you, most of the people in Chalky are related, and because you were family, you got your haircut free, bald head and all. Now it says a lot. Back then, you got laughed at to have a bald head. But I remember Joe Green. There was another guy called Sonora, and these guys were characters in Chalky Mount. They had their ways, but they kept the village happy. Then there was, as I said, Frankie the butcher, who would take care of all your needs and meat, whatever meat you had, whatever animal that was to be slaughtered, Frankie would take care of that for you. But these old guys really kept the place alive. But as I said, Joe Green stood out because he was so multi-talented.
Churches, these were among the more important institutions in communities. The major role they played in community life must be celebrated.
Religion is not left out. There are about 5 major churches in Chalky Mount. You have the Baptist, you have the Christian Mission.
But you know, talking about God and talking about communities and having godly people, one of the godly ladies, Sister Marshall, who was at the Christian Mission Church, you know, because they came in and community investigating, asked people about, she sent a call me. She said, Corsi, because the Corsi is my second name. She said, look, I heard that you are thinking about the police force, but I don't think that's for you. I think the call of God is on your life. And of course, that wasn't anything new. That was confirming what I knew, and the rest is history.
You have the Pentecostal, and right in this area you have perhaps the major church, the Wesleyan Holiness Church,
which was formerly the Pilgrim Holiness Church.
And if you go further around the corner, you also find the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Those are the 5 major churches that make up the area of Chalky Mount.
Patrick Yearwood is an Adventist. He has an interesting story about his church's history here in the community of Chalky Mount.
Yeah, the Adventist Church, as I said, is one of the major religions in Chalky Mount, and it started back in the year 1974. In fact, where the church is now is where the crusade was held. And the pastor at that time was a man called Pastor Hamlin, Hugh Hamlin. He was looking for a spot to put the church. He came to my mother. He said, I need a spot. She said, no problem. They pushed off the spot. And you know, as boys with boys, there was a lot of sand. There was a hill. And my brothers and I, we would take the same coconut bark. We would slide down those hills and have fun until they were ready to build the church. But those were good days back in the old church. The church was small. And I think in those days, the majority of the people in the church were from the area. Because, you know, when a new church comes to the area, everybody wants to go to church. And so we had many fun days in the Adventist church back in the early days, many wonderful times.
Now on to Reverend Joelumberbatch and his experiences with church.
I started out in the Pentecostal church because that's where my grandparents were. They were prominent members in the Pentecostal church. And I can remember, as you would be aware, revival time in the Pentecostal church was something else. I mean, you could not get anywhere to sit. In fact, one thing you can say with Pentecostals is that they have a way of mobilizing their forces. And those people, every night, obviously you would have targeted specific persons to come. And those persons came by car, by truck, by bus. And sometimes you'll say, but I don't know whether it makes sense. Why you invite more people that the church can hold? But they came. And people would be at the windows and the doors watching for the action. And the truth is, I told some people, you talk about dancing? Man, you had a few old people, a few of those old folk. We had a lady, Sister Blackman, who was the wife of the pastor. When she started to jump, I never see her spring her foot yet. I mean, you talk these small heel shoes. They had a name, spike heel shoes. And I mean the woman jumping in the air like the back solidly on the ground. But I mean, these were people who the joy of the Lord was with them, and coming together was a happy time, you know? I remember I told people I went all over Barbados with my grandparents. Harvest time, revival time. And there was a time when I switched. I switched as a boy, actually, from Pentecostal church to the Pilgrim Holiness Church, because the truth is that's where the young people were. At the Pentecostal church, you had largely old people. But you know, I was invited there one night and I liked what I saw. I mean, the activities, the interaction between young people. You know, so I was hooked from there on. So the truth is, that's where largely then I got my upbringing in the Pilgrim Holiness Church. And I want to give credit to the Reverend Dorothy Millington, the late Reverend Dorothy Millington. I mean, you can ask anybody about her. Sometimes she was judged unfairly. Grant you, she was a product of her day. As you know, in the evangelical church, we were very, very, very conservative. And I know, for instance, you couldn't wear a chain, a ring. You couldn't go on that platform without a hat on. In fact, I will tell you that once in my exuberance as a young boy, I was picking up the offering, and I happened to miss somebody. They going up now, you know, waiting for the blessing. She said, go right back. Is that how you're going to do the Lord's work? Go right back. But you can do that to people today. But I didn't fuss, because beyond that, what I know is that she wanted us to give of her best and to approach the Lord's work with the best in mind. And that's who she was. She was not trained like those of us had the privilege of being trained. But you can fault her in terms of her commitment. That church then was a board church. Well, you go to Chalky Mount now, it's a lovely wall structure. But that was a board church. But it was known as the best kept church in her denomination at the time for a small board church. But beyond that, which is more important, she exposed us to some of the best at the time in her church. I have to give it to her for that. She exposed us to the best preachers that we had. the Maloney's. You're from St. Lucie, right? You knew Theophilus Maloney? Reverend Theophilus Maloney, Lisa Hadders, Dr. Taylor. I mean, we were exposed to the best. I'll tell you a little secret about my first sermon. And grant you, I have to credit her for exposing young people. So I can remember I was in charge of leading song service on the Wednesday night, and therefore it was my turn. Now she said, well, I'll give you a chance to preach. There's no exaggeration. My sermon lasts less than 3 minutes. And after 1.5 minutes, I said, excuse me, I have to start all over again. I mean, up to today, my buddies rubbed that in. Reverend Earl Ding, David Kelman, all the fellas would not let me forget that. And they said how I was wrapping up the cloth over the altar. You know, I was possessed with nervousness. And one of the goodly sisters, Sister Boyne, who has gone on to be Lord, she said, brother, get a psalm and start to comment on it. You know, you can't beat the old folk. You know, that's how the old folk used to preach. Give you a running comment. So let's say they're preaching on Psalm 1. They go 1, 2, and if they don't understand 3, they don't touch it 3 at all. Church life was vital to Chalky Mount. And of course, at Chalky Mount, one of the big highlights of the year was the Christmas program. We were one of the few Wesleyan churches that had an all-day Christmas program. You started from morning, you had a lunch break, and you had an afternoon session.
An all-day Christmas program? Hence the importance of these television series. Never heard of it. Now to the future. This place has been an ideal spot for visitors. In fact, it has welcomed people from all over the world. With a love for his community, Patrick Yearwood speaks about the way forward.
I've always said that Chalky Mount has a lot of potential. One of the greatest potentials that any place has is its human capital. And as I said, Chalky Mount has wonderful people. I think the pottery in Chalky Mount can have a wonderful future. What needs to be done though, the infrastructure, the roads need to be improved. And what I can suggest that the pottery industry needs to be revived. There must be promotion of the pottery industry, fixing of the infrastructure. I can see Chalky Mount being a place that can earn Barbados great foreign exchange. It can also provide for many Barbadians work in this time, because once the pottery industry is revived, tourists and locals alike can flock to Chalky Mount with its improved infrastructure, not only in terms of pottery, but basketry, local craft, local foods. You know, individuals can sell little booths and kiosks. They can make money selling local stuff and things like that. So I'm saying to me, the pottery in Chalky Mount has great potential to be a money earner for Barbados. It has potential to boost the employment of individuals in the Chalky Mount area. It has potential to put Barbados even further on the world map, because people, when they come to this part of the world, they want something local. They want something that they're not accustomed to. And with greater infrastructure, with greater promotion, I think that Chalky Mount can become a household name in Barbados again. When I was growing up here in the 70s and 80s, tourists flocked by the hundreds to Chalky Mount. I don't think that happens as much now. But to me, it can be revitalized, sold as a wonderful place that people can come get their pottery, get their craft, but taste and sample local cuisine and enjoy the ambience. It's also good for your health because you have the fresh, untainted air that comes from this part of the world. So I'm saying it's a wonderful place. We can revive the pottery industry. We can also provide employment for many people from this area.
Sometimes I feel that we probably need to run with that and try and see if we can have, you know, injection of energy in that area, so that craft and that skill, that indigenous element will not die from Chalky Mount. In fact, as a boy, I remember you always had tourists in Chalky Mount because that was the place to come. But a lot of things have caused that not to be so. I think to begin with, we have to try and ensure that we have proper roads. The truth is the roads, whether you're coming from the St. Joseph Inn into Chalky Mount It's terrible, especially that Coconut Grove stretch. And if you're coming up from Belle Plaine side up Coggins Hill, that's even more terrible. So I don't think that persons will be inclined to bring their vehicles or bring tourists that way if the journey is not a pleasant one. So I think that that is something that needs to be addressed immediately, and have some more incentives for those tour guides to bring people back back to Chalky Mount. And of course, we can go on to talk about the resources of St. Andrew, the natural resources, the sand, the material, the clay material for the pottery, the material that is used in the cement plant. If there's one regret I have, though, or one thing that I like to see, though, I would like to see St. Andrew get a spruce up. And this is not any political statement, because you know the thing about Barbados, where people put a political spin to everything you say. But when we were coming up, to some extent, Belle Plaine was considered the unofficial town, right? As it stands now, I don't even think that we have a resident doctor in St. Andrew. The police station is closed. The children's home that was down there was closed, and the clinic was closed. I don't know if the post office is reopened, but I think there can be some new injection of life. And I want to score, there's nothing political. It's just from my heart, because that is my home. I feel that we need to have some more activities. And the truth is, I can go on and talk so much about St. Andrew and the Chalky Monkey experience. The truth is, wherever I go, I am not ashamed to let people know that I am a St. Andrew man. A St. Andrew man, true and true. And which word is at the top of the alphabet? A. So as far as I'm concerned, we are number one.
Well, I cannot dispute that. You have heard it directly from the mouth of a man from St. Andrew. This has been Mind Community. Special thanks to Jennifer Leacock here at the Chalky Mount Bar. Until next week at the same time, I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Goodbye for now.